Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the special C2E2 Chicago edition of the Jim Cornette Experience. Here on the Cultcast today, we're going to talk about my trip to Chicago, plus incendiary Twitter wars that happened around it that you may have heard of. And our guest today, the mastermind behind the upcoming Vice documentary series on Vice TV, Dark Side of the Ring, that begins airing on April 10th, Evan Husney. He's going to tell us how it came together and where it's going from here. All that and more today on a very mellifluous Called in the Ring edition of the Jim Cornette Experience. To join me in doing this, Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you, the post office playboy, Swammy's Pappy, the proprietor of the French Toast Chateau, and apparently an undercover investigator for the Internal Revenue Service, the great Brian Lass.
Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be here once again. If there's any department of the government that you're going to associate me with, I'm glad you didn't pick the one I actually do stuff with.
Well, you know, the CIA is a venerable organization that, no, I am, by the way, I'm parched. I made the mistake of having a very good pizza very late at night last night because obviously we're recording this on Wednesday. It'll drop on Thursday. It might be thrown out on Thursday. Monday night was when we got back from Chicago, dead tired, got up Tuesday and began processing the orders for the Cult of Cornette. The orders had come in while we'd been away, had to unpack the truck. We sold out of almost everything. But unpack our clothing, process the mail, do the things you got to do, finish about 9 or 10 o'clock last night, and ordered a big old bear nose pizza with sausage and bacon and extra cheese and a couple of sides of meatballs. And oh my God, it was so good. However, as a local chain here, Bear Nose, by the way. And this is the center of the world for pizza, Louisville, for whatever reason. But, whoo boy, I am not only so thirsty, I've drunk 2 gallons of Sprite so far today, and I'm fixing to stick a garden hose down my neck. But also I was full when I woke up this morning. So I'm trying to, I tell you, it's hard being irrelevant. Brian, I've had another exhausting weekend filled with meeting the Cult of Cornette, giving the Cult of Cornette the greasy goodness of have a beef with JC at the C2E2. A tremendous time, which we're going to talk about, but I'm getting too old for this. I actually went to Chicago, ate like a fiend, going to the chair every chance that I got, and still lost 5 pounds over the weekend.
How was the sandwich? How was the have a beef with Corny sandwich?
It was phenomenal when I warmed mine up in the microwave at midnight after I'd finished watching everybody else eat theirs while I was telling stories. No. And we want to thank Al's #1 Chicago Italian beef, the place that Bob Luce recommended, the place that all the wrestlers used to go to eat, the place that you can go now and get #1 Chicago Italian beef. That's Al's in a number of Chicagoland locations.
It's hard to hear you say that and not hear Bob Luce's voice.
Or Moose Cholak going, nim, 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 when he was faked biting the sandwich. Like he was working. They only had one sandwich. If they had to do more than one take, he didn't want to fuck it up, right? So anyway, and that's why we're calling it in the ring, folks. I got no notes, but I had a great weekend, and I want to thank several people specifically. It was my first time ever at C2E2, but I'd heard about it from Svengoolie and some of the fans, and This was the biggest comic convention, pop culture convention extravaganza. It's the biggest I've ever seen, biggest I've ever been to. It was ginormous. We will talk much more about that. But Gabe Yoakum does a tremendous job. He was my guy at that's in charge of pretty much everything. It looked like at C2E2, and Gabe actually got engaged. He asked his fiance on the floor of the convention, because that's where they met a year ago. So that we had several engagements going on. So congratulations to Gabe, and he was a superstar. And I met his brother and his father, who couldn't come down, sent him some Bobby Heenan DVDs. But not only that, but 2 of the people, and I don't have notes with me, and I tried to write down their names, but 2 of the people that came to the VIP Have a Beef got engaged. She got him tickets to my show, and he got her a diamond ring at the same time.
Wow.
So it was about, pretty much even.
Yeah.
But so they were joyously celebrating that. It was the gathering of the cult of Cornette was the big thing. But Gabe Yoakum, thank you. So we saw Svengoolie and Jim Roach from MeTV and their crew and their family. That was fun. Caught up with a bunch of people I hadn't seen in ages. But at the Have a Beef, let me start out with that. As mentioned, we had sold out, and if I was a good businessman, and this could be a recurring theme, if I was a good businessman, I should have done 2 shows. Because I don't know physically if I could have done it with everything else I did, but I should have, because I talked to so many people that couldn't get in, that got shut out the last week or 10 days, and were waiting until, the weekend to come. But at the same time, as we mentioned, I wanted to limit it to, we ended up with 108 instead of 100. We shoehorned a couple more people in, but I wanted to make sure that everybody got a sandwich, everybody got the photo op, everybody was a VIP. And we did it in about 3 hours and I believe 40 minutes or so. Not only did I told the stories, did the Q&A, we had the sandwiches and all that stuff in under 4 hours. So I didn't beat Springsteen's record, but everybody got some personal attention, and that's what I wanted to do, because it's so, they listen to the shows, Brian. They know, I saw some 605 shirts, but obviously a lot of my shirts. Everybody listens to the show. They know us. They support us. I told them I'm still amazed at, because this now has not become, well, we know Jim Cornette from wrestling. Some of the people that were there, obviously some of the spouses, didn't know who the fuck I was before a year ago, and their significant other or whatever got them involved. And so now they're just kind of coming to see me wrestling or no. So that's kind of cool, as I mentioned. But anyway, Kerry Bygod Hare and his lovely wife, Katie, came up from Boonville, Mississippi. I don't know if they got the travel award, but it was his birthday.
Oh, wow.
Happy birthday, Kerry.
Yeah, happy birthday, Kerry.
He had this fucking suit on, and he stood up to ask a question. I said, Kerry's problem is his birthday. And he told his wife to go to Cox's and get him a seersucker suit, but she got mixed up and went to Sears instead. And see, it takes a second, but I
like that one. That was a good one.
But anyway, so many of the folks that I recognize their names because they order, and I do all the labels at Cornette's Collectibles. So I wanted to thank everybody from the number of laughs and questions and tweets and all that stuff. I think everybody had a good time. But it's just, it's cool that we've got this. I have now, I guess, somewhat of a traveling following, like, when I go to these different cities, like the Grateful Dead, on a much smaller basis, limited to like 2 or 3 lonely people. No, but anyway, and then at C2E2, we saw thousands of people. Here was the thing. This was a huge place. I talked to some people on Sunday who said, we've been trying to find you since Friday. I actually, Friday afternoon, had to leave my booth and go take a leak. And when I came out of the bathroom, I went up the wrong flight of stairs, and it took me 25 minutes to find my own booth again. Because it was incredible, the size of this thing, but there's something for everybody. But I talked to so many people, and they came by, and what I said earlier about being a bad businessman, tell me what you think about this. I have recently started charging for photo ops because I didn't used to. And people were looking at me like I had steaming turds hanging out of my mouth for doing that. But I've got the whole line of collectibles and merchandise, DVDs and shirts and books and autograph pictures and the various sundry items, right? But for the longest time, if I saw guys charging, and not just guys in the wrestling business, but you go to these comic conventions, William Shatner, $60 for an 8x10 or $75 for a selfie or whatever the fuck. And I'm just like, fuck, that's a lot of money for most people, right? Especially if you're coming someplace where there's multiple things to see. How much money can you fucking spend? And truthfully, I still don't put myself on the level of a celebrity of a William Shatner or whatever the fuck, although I do a better monkey flip. I thought you'd get that one.
I got it.
All right. You just didn't like it. Okay. I said, there's a difference there. But anyway, So my autograph pictures are $10, right? But I see the prices that even the other wrestlers and the other wrestling people charge. I said, all right. So what I did was, and especially when you go up in the Northeast, it's bigger shows or the bigger markets, they expect it. Sometimes I'll say, oh, don't worry, you bought something, I'll take a picture with you for nothing. And they throw the money at me anyway, because they can tell I'm a bad businessman. So I started doing, and tell me if this was wrong of me or not, a $20 combo where you get an autographed 8x10 and a photo op with your own camera for $20. If you want either thing, it'd still be $20, except for the last day when I was trying to move some shit. I was making deals. But that way I feel like, okay, you paid $20 for the 8x10. I'll take the picture with you for nothing. But I was brought up in the wrestling business when a babyface was asked to take a picture with a fan when they had their little Kodak Instamatic there and the flash cube, that you just stood there and did it because you should be thankful that they want their picture taken with you, right? But now it's become a business. But I'm old-fashioned like that. Do you think I was gouging people?
No, I think that's actually very fair. And look, it's the coin of the realm. You kind of have to do that right now. That's the way these things work. But I remember when I was a kid, you may remember this too, because I know you were around them a little bit, like a Resi's convention and stuff. Bruno Sammartino was like the last guy who wouldn't charge for autographs. And eventually even he was like, what the fuck am I doing? You know, and eventually at the end he was charging, but he held out as long as he could. I don't want to charge the fans for this, but like I said, it's just the state of where things are with pseudo celebrities and celebrities that you do charge for autographs.
And which one am I, kind sir?
What was that joke you had before about the leapfrog?
Yeah, all right. Well, he didn't say pseudo comedian now. That might be. Anyway, now see, that got you.
That got me.
All right. Anyway, so that's what I did, but there's still exceptions. But I'm a bad businessman, and there's sometimes when I go and I'm on a flat fee with a promoter, which is seldom, but sometimes it happens that they sell tickets and do things and whatever the fuck, and make up the pricing and everything because they've got an investment. But most of the time I'm doing my own thing. And Stacy was there with me and she's taking the pictures. But here's the thing, and then sometimes I will violate that rule because I just got to think I see so many guys, you hear fans talking about so many guys that are just sitting there and they're grumpy or they're not interacting with people. If I'm going to go and do this shit, then I do it. And one thing that happened, and I hope he won't mind, I'm not going to mention his full name, but I hope he won't mind me talking about him. But one thing that happened over the convention, before we get to the hard part of it, made me feel good. This guy came up and he was in a wheelchair. And come to find out, and he tweeted and everything, had more information. But I thought he might be a veteran at first, but it turns out he had an illness that led to septic shock. And I'm not sure what all that entails medically, but the point is he had to have both legs amputated below the knee and had artificial legs and had both hands amputated like down on the forearms. And so a friend of his was there to because this place is massive. He had to have a chair. There was no other choice, but the point is this guy comes up, his name's Patrick, and he was thrilled to meet me. This guy has not only gone through all that health-wise, but has that day made the decision to get up and leave his house and go with his friend and travel to downtown Chicago and park wherever the fuck they parked and somehow get into this place and this huge show floor and fighting the crowds and all that stuff. And by the time he gets there to my booth, not only is he thrilled to meet me, but I think I can't remember. I gave him a DVD or some burger towels, whatever. I gave him 8x10, but I wanted to take a picture with him. And I'm not saying I gave him all this shit and make myself a big baby face, but it would be a heel if I'd be a heel if I sold him this shit, right? So now I'm even because he deserved it. He had $40 worth of stuff's not going to affect my standard of living, but he deserved it. The point is, when I went around to take the photo op, I started to kneel down. He said, "No, let me stand up for this." And son of a gun, if he didn't, and he kind of pushed himself up. And once he got up, we had to steady him a little bit as he got out of the chair, locked the chair, and he's standing on his artificial legs for the photo op because he wanted to make sure it was right. He went through that kind of effort. And so, I mean, that's an extreme example, but if I can't be goddamn cheerful, where do you hear that today? If I can't be goddamn cheerful, and nice to these people that have met, and I'm in the business. I'm being paid to be there, etc. I'm making money on my stuff. But if I can't be cheerful and, interact with people and make sure everybody gets what they want and it's right, and they feel like I didn't just, not give a shit or whatever, then I shouldn't be there, and I won't be at any point that happens. It just, so it was cool.
And by the way, I saw something, I retweeted it after you tweeted it, where I guess after he left the convention, he went out bowling and he got a strike.
Yes. That was the greatest part.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
He tweeted a video of a bowling trip that he had taken where he fucking bowled a strike. And I mean, so that's, and once again, I'm complaining, which I'm fixing to, about how hard this thing was, but there's people digging ditches and there's people like that. So we got to put things in perspective. But let me tell you, mentally and physically, I'm getting too old for this shit, Brian. That's why I'm trying to slow down. Of course, every time I say that, I guess if I say now I can't take any more jobs for this year, I'll end up as Secretary of Defense or something. But we got a load-in day was Thursday, because this place I found out, McCormick Place, is the biggest convention center, indoor convention center in North America. It's just massive. And there's several wings to it, right? So Thursday was a load-in day because you can't just, wheel a dolly into this fucking thing, right? So we get up there Wednesday night and, drive up to Chicago, get checked in the hotel, get something to eat next door at the place because it's 30-something degrees and the wind is 35 miles an hour. And we're in downtown Chicago, but it's not like you can't walk 2 or 3 blocks in this weather. At least I wasn't going to. It fucking hurt. And so we're not like in, just right in the middle of goddamn restaurant haven. There's a Subway across the street. There's a White Castle down on the corner, whatever, a Jerk Villa. I'm not sure. I think the Jerk store called. They were all out of him. I don't know. They had jerk chicken.
Oh,
I don't want chicken that's been an asshole when it was alive. I want nice chicken. Anyway, so we went next door and it was meh. And we went to bed Thursday morning. We're up at 6 o'clock. And I'm going to tell you folks this, because I know besides the fact some people like to hear me complain, this is setting up some of the controversy that happened at the end of the weekend. Thursday morning, we're up at 6 o'clock so that we can get the truck from the valet, Black Beauty, and drive it around. We have to drive 2 miles around the far side of the complex where the load-in area is, where you have to stop at the guard shack and get you a card and get in line. But we got in line right when the doors opened up at 8 o'clock so we could get in there because apparently it's a shit show the rest of the day, right? So they let us drive the expedition actually into one of these giant exhibition halls. You can hang glide in these things. It's goddamn unbelievable. And then they put us in a parking area in the exhibition hall where they're parking the vehicles. Then we unload all our stuff on a pallet. Then they have a forklift come and pick it up and drive it across this massive fucking room into the next zip code and put it where our booth is. Then we set up our booth. By the time we finish with that and get back to the hotel with the fucking truck to put it back in the hotel parking, it's almost fucking noon, right? We're wore out. So we got 1 day to sleep and we're going to take advantage of it because the next day is going to be chaos. So then we take a nap in the afternoon. Well, I'm working on some of my writing projects that are overdue in the room, and we take a nap. And here was the best part. I'm going to recommend a service that doesn't even sponsor us, folks, but they saved my life. Because once again, that day we don't want it. And now it's still cold. It's windy. I think that was the day it might have been drizzling. We don't want to go anywhere. Stacy finds Grubhub on the phone. Grubhub.
Yeah.
Now, by the name.
You've never heard of Grubhub before?
Well, I've seen the commercials.
Okay.
But I don't have a smartphone, so I've never used it. And why would we Grubhub in our own home when we already have our fucking grub here? But now we need grub. And Grubhub, thanks to the Burger Bar Chicago, I got to play. I ate the bacon cheeseburger with a fried egg and a fucking order of barbecue wings that were just fucking incredible. Ate like I was going to the chair, go to sleep, get up Friday morning. We're in a hotel, Brian, that has a breezeway, and you walk across the breezeway, which goes right across the street and into McCormick Place, which is this giant convention center. Well, that's very handy. So we get up Friday morning, and we're going to walk over there, and they said, just follow the signs, right? We walk across the breezeway. We're in McCormick Place. We're in the West Wing. We got to go to the South Wing. We're following them signs for a fucking while. Stacy has one of those Fitbit watches, and we figured out that apparently to walk across that breezeway from our hotel to the adjoining convention center and to the room that C2E2 was in was about a mile and a half.
Holy shit.
I haven't walked a mile and a half in the last 3 months combined, right? So by the time I get I'm blowed up. Now I'm cheerful and happy all day, right? From 10 to 7. And then we got to walk a mile and a half back. So we're okay. We're going to get ready for it, right? And it was a great day at the booth, like I said, and meeting people and everything. We go the wrong way. We go down the wrong escalators. We end up out on the street. We have to walk around one of these goddamn buildings in the fucking 100-degree or 100-mile-an-hour winds in the Windy City with that wind chill cutting us in half. They're used to it. They're just walking around like it's normal. So, and to finally get back into things, so we walk about 3 miles on the way back. So every other day after that, we got a cab to the building across the street. I swear to God. I'd get in the cab, right? And I'd say, it's a short trip. I'm going to double your meter. Take us to the other side of that fucking building. And son of a bitch. So, yes, I've said, but it was fucking brutal. Anyway, Saturday morning, we get over there by cab, and we're there. And Friday night, we Grubhubbed again. Same thing, Burger Bar Chicago. Saturday morning, we go over there by cab again. I'm at the booth from 10 to 5. Then we cab back over to the hotel so that I can freshen up. And Stacy actually Grubhubbed in the car. Since the only thing, I was busy from start to finish. One day I had a snuck of McDonald's that she got from the food court. And one day I had an actual hot dog without the bun, just dipped in a little ketchup because the bun was so big and white bread. And I figured, what the fuck, I'm trying to be good. So I would binge feast every night on Grubhub. So I Grubhubbed. Then we got a cab back over, did the VIP show, and got back to the hotel a little after midnight. And I warmed up the Al Chicago Italian beef in the microwave. And then on Sunday, I didn't eat anything because it was a short day. We were only there from 10 to 5. And since everybody bought everything like a plague of locusts, thank you very much, we just took a hand dolly and one tub of leftover T-shirts and the stuff we bought and wheeled it down and put it in the fucking cab and took a cab back over to the fucking hotel and had Grubhub again. And
2 years ago, you would have called me up and been like, Brian, I gained 25 pounds this weekend. In fact, I've had that phone call in the past.
Well, yeah, but there was no time to eat. Except to binge feast once a day, and with all that walking and handshaking and baby kissing and et cetera that I did, I lost 5 pounds over the weekend doing that. So anyway, but I said that was once again going to lead to state of mind, because I get back on Sunday, we get that stuff in the room, we get to Grubhub. And now all we got to do is get up the next morning and drive 300 and something miles back home. But still, you know, the hard physical part of the weekend is over with. And I'm thinking I'm going to relax, right? I'm going to get on Twitter and just retweet some of these wonderful fan photos that the Cult of Cornette has tweeted. And I'm going to thank everybody for the wonderful time that I had there. And the first thing that I see is a tweet from Eric Bischoff. And now I want a backstory. Some people obviously might not be aware of this, but a couple of years ago, Eric and I, the only time we've ever worked together was when we did the Table for Three at the WWE Hall of Fame ceremony, and they showed it on the network sometime later on with Michael Hayes. And that's really, we've always been on opposite sides. We've never known each other personally. He was promoting opposite me when I was running Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and he'd come in with WCW. Or when I was with the WWF and he was with WCW. By the time he joined the WWF, I was in OVW and never fucking saw him. We had no relationship whatsoever, except a lot of people who I liked didn't like him. But in that instance, we bonded over a mutual hatred of Shitstain, because everybody hates him. I guess it's something that, if everybody can agree on, like, ice cream is good, Vince Russo sucks, whatever. But that's it. But since then, that time, although I had been critical of Eric in the past, as a matter of fact, in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, well, not in WCW, you can go back on a tag team title change on, I can't remember whether it's Nitro or Thunder, probably Nitro. They taped it in Johnson City, Tennessee at Freedom Hall, and you can go back, and during the finish, the entire front row's holding a sign that says, "We want it raw." Or things like that, because he used to invade my territory. So I'd peckered him a little from afar.
Well, the other thing, too, if you remember that Table for Three, unfortunately, they so heavily edited that they had half the story. You said, remember the only time we met? And then they edited out the whole part where you said, yeah you cut the video of me and Watch. Yeah. You're the one who edited it. They took that whole part out.
Well, we talked for an hour and a half, and it aired for like 25 minutes or whatever. But nevertheless, so the point is that we've had this long-distance surly relationship, but after a couple years ago, I've left him alone. Except for recently when, how I don't like it when people, say bad things about bad things, or say like bad things happening to my friends. Let's say, basically, Dave Meltzer broke his hand not long ago. I've known Dave for 30-something years, and Bischoff tweeted, well, sources say Dave Meltzer broke his arm from patting himself on the back. And I tweeted back, sources say Eric Bischoff had a permanently strained groin from trying to get himself over.
I didn't see that one.
But I didn't think that was extremely provocative.
No.
And then, and we did joke when my show in Chicago sold out. Well, you can still get tickets to, Eric Bischoff and Tony's show. But Tony Schiavone's a friend of mine. He was in on that, too. I wasn't trying to slander anybody. I didn't think that was that provocative. And it's true because they let a lot more people in because they had two tiers, VIP and regular, whatever.
And by the way, I think I'm the one who said that on the air, not you.
And actually, you said that, yes. But we hadn't really been that provocative here recently to Mr. Bischoff. But the tweet said something to the effect of, well, yeah, he was answering somebody. Jim Cornette can sell out an effing broom closet, but my show, sponsored by Dick Pills, with Tony Schiavone, et cetera, we drew almost 300 people and blah, blah, blah. And I think, therein may lay the root of the problem, because we did do a comedy bit last week where we made fun of the fact that we keep getting asked to be sponsored by Dick Pills, and not even like the generic Dick Pills.
And we keep shooting it down.
And we keep shooting that idea down because I don't even know if I could make that entertaining or not. But anyway,
but we're against the idea of taking on any sponsor that thinks wrestling fans are the lowest common denominator that they should look to fleece.
Well, now you're starting to fucking slander again, because you're going to find out this may be what brought this all on. But at any rate, but the point is, no, I just I don't want to push pharmaceuticals, the things off on people. You never know these days, especially with all the deregulation going on under the fucking orange asshole. But anyway, his tweet said, sell out a fucking broom closet, which ain't that bad. And our show, Drew, sponsored by Dick Pills. But go sell bibs, bitch. I just mentioned to you what a kind of a physically and mentally stressful weekend, very financially remunerative, but nevertheless hard work and hectic schedule. And Brian, you know how I get sometimes when I'm rushed and harried and tired and frazzled.
Yep.
And now I've said it before and I'll say it again. You cannot slander the burger towels. Do not you can throw the coffee, but don't slander the burger towels. See, I knew you'd get that one too. Don't slander the burger towels. And I wasn't happy that he was insinuating that I would put my fine VIP cult of Cornette fans in a broom closet, especially with Al's #1 Chicago Italian beef on the line. but the bitch didn't sit real good. So I tweeted, and I'm not going to read these because I'll say, here's the thing. There was one tweet that I put out in response to that, and then I saw the second tweet, and this is where it got a little bit more serious. And actually, a lot of people didn't know. Maybe they thought the first one might have been more, but the second tweet was, well, Cornette, I'm trying to think how he went into this. He said, basically saying that I was
Trust fund baby.
Well, no, first he said, I'm a tortured soul. He said I was a tortured soul.
That's right. S-O-L-E.
Yes. Soul, S-O-L-E. So then the cult of Cornette started jumping in. Wait a minute. Does that mean that he's a mistreated bottom of someone's foot? Or he's and then somebody tweeted a picture of a fillet of soul with, fucking garlic. And has he been crushed up with garlic to be a tortured soul? But he's a tortured soul, a trust fund kid or baby or whatever who lives off his mommy and daddy's hard work, trying to relive his 8 minutes of fame. And a lot of people jumped on the tortured soul because it was funny and indicative of the fact that he probably didn't know what he was fucking talking about already. But a lot of people also jumped on the 8 minutes of fame thing. 8 minutes of fame, because when you do the math, as far as actively participating at some significant level professionally in or around the wrestling industry over the past 40 years, my career has lasted at least 5 times as long as Eric's, because mine has been nearly continuous, whereas his has been in a few fits and a couple, as they say, spurts. But what took this from a playful Twitter exercise to a vengeance is mine, saith the cult leader, was not even the Mama Cornette, because Mama Cornette was a wrestling character, referred to, never seen, when she was alive, which it's been 17 years now since she hasn't been. But my father was never a wrestling gimmick or a wrestling character, and he's been dead 50 years. And in my state of mind, where I was in that hotel in downtown Chicago, and by the way, I didn't even mention all of my other phobias going on, where I've handed off the keys to Black Beauty and Black Beauty herself to a valet guy who I bribed ridiculously with huge tips every day just so nothing would happen.
Yeah, you have to.
And I'm in the middle of a fucking city where I can look out the window of the 16th floor of the hotel and all I can see are buildings and lights and concrete and traffic and people. And there's a big apartment building across the street from me, where it looks like they live in an ant farm, and they each have a little balcony, 6 square feet they can come out, and they're living on, there must be 1,000 people living in that one building, and it's just people and noise as far as the eye can see, and all of my phobias and concerns. And I'm in this box in the hotel room, and I'm looking at a guy that's just called me a bitch, and now he is suggesting that I have somehow disrespected my mother and or father's legacy, and I'm just wasting away some type of, fucking wastrel like a fucking Trump kid. And that's what hit me. And I decided that I was going to make it my personal mission to drive this man and his reputation and his very soul into the ground, pulverize it, shit on the ground so flowers will grow. And the cult of Cornette was kind enough to jump on to the point where, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for this. If it was within my power and capability to feel sorry, to feel any empathy for or pity for a person that I'm pissed at, this would have been the time. It was a Twitter debacle. A one-sided rout, the likes of which and I'm not even going to repeat, because there's still more to this story. I'm not even going to repeat some of the things that I said on Twitter. I haven't deleted anything. It's all out there if you want to look it up. I don't have it here in front of me, and I can't remember some of it, but it was some good material, and it was toward Mr. Bischoff personally. I don't know if it was, the word would be stiff. And let me put it this way.
I saw it as truthful.
Well, I didn't say there was anything untrue about it. It was very, what happened was, because I mentioned I didn't have any type of relationship, personal or professional, with Eric Bischoff, and so he hasn't had one with me, so he didn't really consult before he did this with anybody that had a personal relationship with me, or they would have told him, if he don't know it's coming and he's in on it, or if he don't know you and you just fucking snipe at Jim Cornette, he will not stop until you have been completely eviscerated. Your entrails are laying on the floor in front of him, and he's skipping rope with the last 8 feet of them. So he wasn't aware what kind of peas that he was opening, I don't believe. But anyway, by the time that, and then of course, I'm driving back home on Monday from Chicago, and of course, we got to take the 25-minute detour through downtown Gary, Indiana. On a weekday morning, folks, not a lot of businesses open in that particular town, at least not ones that take place in a regularly scheduled place of business. There was a few transactions I saw going on behind buildings. I got to percolating on it even further, and I decided that I was going to make it my life's mission, as I said. But what I did on Tuesday was I called. I don't have Eric Bischoff's phone number because we've never spoken on the phone, and he don't have mine, I'm sure, didn't at the time. So I called a person who I knew would have his number and offered to my information through this person. And I explained to this person, who was an intermediary in this situation, that the fucking I was insulted because I thought it was a disrespect to my parents overall. I didn't like the bitch. But with what I had already done, we were even on pretty much everything. As a matter of fact, like I said, when I scared Vince Russo, I almost felt sorry for the little fella when I scared him. But I figured the fucking tongue lashing that he had gotten from the entire world, we were even on pretty much everything except the parent thing. I was upset about that. And I explained to the intermediary that a shitstorm of biblical proportions was fixing to come down. And I gave options that included a meeting to see if that fucking bullshit kung fu shit could work against the baseball bat, because at least this time I wouldn't be fighting somebody younger than me. Or I basically just registered my upsettedness.
No, there was going to be a big shitstorm. I can say that. There was a lot more coming down the line.
But here's the thing. So within a short time, I was contacted by Mr. Bischoff. And I'm not going to go into all of our conversation. It was, I would say, testy, but there was not any screaming. There was not a lot of profanity because I was laying out, he had, obviously the thing was, apparently we find out dick pills are the goddamn leading financial system in America now. They're the dick pills are what's driving the United States economy.
Or at least the shows that need them.
No, the dick pills are driving the United States economy, Brian, because that of all the things that I've ever said about Eric Bischoff, of all the things, apparently this was the knock on the sponsored dick pills was what gave him the thought to fire the first shot. But when I explained to him, and I'm just going to take a disturbing turn here towards sanity, folks, here in a second. I'm going to say this. After we had aired a few issues, when I told him that what really put me over the top on an already stressful weekend was the fact that I felt that it was disrespect, that he was insinuating that I was disrespecting my mother and father by wasting their, and by the way, my dad's been dead 50 years. He was very successful. But I don't know if a fucking Rockefeller inheritance would have me set for life after this point in time. And yes, and my mother left me some money as well because she was born in the Depression and she would take the fucking $1.98 coleslaw back if it was spoiled at Kroger and get her money back on those type of things. But once again, we're not talking Trump level inheritances here. But that I was disrespecting my parents in some way, especially my dad. And Eric Bischoff was man enough to say that he never intended any, he didn't mean it that way, he didn't intend it that way, And he did apologize because he doesn't bring people's families into things. He did apologize if I took it that he intended that there was in any way it was slander on my mom and dad. And I accepted that apology because he didn't have to offer it. And he hit me at a bad time and hit me on a fucking nerve spot when he brought my dad into it. So he didn't have to do that. So I accepted that. Now, he didn't apologize for anything else he said about me, and I didn't ask him to. Because to be quite honest with the goddamn, he's going to need windshield wipers with Rain-X for the next 6 months to wipe the shit off his fucking glasses from the shitstorm that he got from the cult, much less from me. I believe that enough belittling and personal things were said to make up for the bitch and the especially slagging off on the fucking burger towels. But I can't take it any further because he apologized for what I was most upset about. But therein lies a fucking tale that I believe I mentioned with New Jack one time before. If you want to joust with somebody, then either if you're just intending a friendly joust, they need to know about it beforehand, or elsewise, if you joust with me on Twitter, I don't care who you are, I will leave no fucking flesh onto your calcium, and I will pick my teeth with your bones and then grind them to make my bread. Don't fuck with me on Twitter. But therein lies the tale of the 3-day war between Cornette and Bischoff. Was I too stiff on those Twitter things?
I would have gone further. Yeah, I don't think you were stiff enough.
How could I have gone? Well, I just didn't have time or space.
Well, like I said, if it had gone on a few more days, it was about to get really heavy.
Well, I tell you what, actually, if I hadn't had to get in the car and drive home, and then I was so fucking wore out, if I'd had access to a Twitter machine within 20 feet of me or so all day Monday, it could have been brutal. But anyway.
Can I say something, Jim?
I wish you would.
I just want to say, we've been very fortunate. The Jim Cornette podcasts have always been successful. And in the last year, they've become extremely successful. And we've made these shows, we don't really talk inside baseball too much. We've made these shows highly profitable with minimal sponsors and alternate ways of monetizing the shows that other people still haven't figured out.
You don't have to defend us. No, I'm sure everybody knows we're doing well. You're making me bashful here.
We will never, every sponsor and advertiser that we've accepted on the show has to go through a process where we sit down and we say, is this something we would endorse? Is this something we would eat? Whatever it may be. And then they get on the air.
When I did that spot for, as a matter of fact, when I did that spot for, I won't mention because they're not paying us twice, but the underwear, I actually, when I have to wear a suit, those are the most comfortable undies to ever wear. So we personally try this shit out, whether it be a mattress or a strawberry or a fucking pair of shorts.
We've turned down shit even after they've sent it to you. And you say, I don't know. And I said, well, then we're not doing it. But I promise you, we will never accept ads from anyone that's looking to fleece the listeners. Never.
Not that we're saying that about dick pills.
Not that you're saying that about dick pills.
Well, the we is collective, so but anyway, but yeah, who would have known that the 3-day war was started over dick pills? Anyway, real quick, and that's the thing. Our show schedule. Talking about the podcast, let's talk about how the people can hear them. We do have a drive-through this coming Monday as normal. And then instead of an experience next Thursday, a week from this one, or whenever you're listening to this, the next week's episode, that's WrestleMania weekend. We're going to do a review of WrestleMania. Obviously, we can't review it 3 days before it happens. And I'm going to be in New York. More on that in a minute. So we're going to do... As soon as I get back, hopefully I'm going to be watching WrestleMania live in my living room on my big screen. And we're going to do a show turn that around on Monday morning and get it out as quickly as possible so the people can hear thoughts on that and et cetera, as they seem to enjoy that every year. So no experience next Thursday, but it will come out early the following week. And it'll be about WrestleMania and also my trip to New York for MLW. And that's another thing, once again, frazzled, folks. And boy, by the way, when I went to the post office this morning, because I filled all the Cult of Cornette's collectibles orders. If you've ordered up until like Monday, then the 25th, then or Tuesday, the 26th, everything's already been sent out. But I was there at the post office this morning. Someone was trying to give some sketchy information to Susie on a passport application. So that took a while. But anyway, we're going to be filling those again before I leave. And I'm going to be leaving and headed up to New York. That takes a couple of days. We're doing a day of promos and pre-tapes. So next week will be very hectic. But Thursday and Friday, the 4th and 5th, I'll be at the Melrose Ballroom. And they are working out a special meet and greet. That's the only place in New York that weekend you're going to see me, folks. I don't have enough energy to go anywhere else. These are going to be fucking 12-hour plus days as it is. So come to the MLW events at the Melrose Ballroom in Long Island City. If you want to see me or meet me oh, come on, you're a snob. You used to live in the city.
I never lived in, first of all, I never lived in a city. I lived on the beach. I commuted into the city because I never wanted to live in the city. Second of all, Long Island City is in the city. Long Island City fucking sucks.
It says it is.
It's Queens. It's Queens.
Long Island City. Well, it's Queens. Well, Queens is a fucking all this shit city to me.
Manhattan's the city. Everything else is Queens or Brooklyn or whatever. That's the way New Yorkers see it.
To me, if you ain't got at least an acre of fucking land apiece, then you're living in the city. Anyway, I'm going to be there, and that's the only place I'm going to be in New York. So get on MLW.com and figure out how to come see us, or watch us on BN Sports. Battle Ride is live. And then it's only a little over 2 weeks away in Madison, West Virginia, All-Star Wrestling. Stephen P. New is going to be there to present some proclamations to Bobby Fulton and Tracy Smothers and the big induction of the Midnight Express and I into the ASW Hall of Fame. The Crockett Cup is coming up in Charlotte/Concord, North Carolina on April 27th. I'm going to be there with the Midnight, the Rock and Roll, Magnum, Nikita, special VIPs. I'm doing a panel with Billy Corgan on the future of the NWA, and I'm doing color commentary. Goddamn, can I get any more fucking jobs? Color commentary that night on the broadcast. I'll be popping the corn, and I'll be salting it real good so they sell more drinks at the concession stand. Richmond's coming up in May, Richmond, Virginia. Just get on JimCornette.com because I'm tired out and can't tell you all the other things I'm going to be doing all year. Do your plugs so we can get our guest on the line.
Before I get to my plugs, I have to ask you a production-related question because you just discussed it on the air and we haven't discussed this off air. WrestleMania. Obviously, we're doing the big WrestleMania review. It's one of our more popular shows every year. I read somewhere, and I haven't followed up on this, that WrestleMania is supposed to be like 8 fucking hours.
No. Okay, well, let me clarify this.
Please do.
I don't care what they're goddamn doing on anything else except the pay-per-view that I buy on my big screen TV from my cable company. I'm not going to get on the network. I'm not going to watch the fucking internet. I know people have sent me cards for the WWE network, but that would necessitate me going on the internet and figuring out how to use them. I'm barely now, my goddamn computer has some fucking gimmick in it that I can't even fucking send emails right. So whatever my cable company feeds me is what I'm going to review. And if I don't see it on there, it ain't getting talked about.
Okay, so basically you're saying I only have to watch the 3 or 4 hours that are on the pay-per-view portion of the show.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
There you go.
I think it's a Met game that day, so thank you.
Well, because, fuck it. Goddamn, it's getting to the point where it's like this convention center. I had a birthday while I was walking from my hotel to the fucking booth one day. It's you can't watch that much. And if it's not on the, I'm going to be old fashioned. If it's not on the pay-per-view broadcast, the full live broadcast that goes out on regular fucking cable systems, then they don't consider it important enough. Why should I? And not everybody can play. Sometimes there's the guy on the, like the Roger Berkman of the 1980 Louisville Cardinals. Sometimes the guy just sits on the bench and comes in at the end of the game when we either need somebody fresh because everybody's fouled out or fucking, the story has already been told.
Thank God they didn't do this shit where they get everyone on the card when they were running 4 shows a night.
Oh, fuck. Can you imagine? Yeah, they had to have 100 guys. And, well, they've got, I'm sure, 100 now, but just that not that you can tell apart.
Bingo. But
have you noticed that everybody on the right, the WWF must have had fucking 100 wrestlers on their roster in the 80s, and you could tell every single one of them apart.
Yeah. Not one of them had a really bad tattoo. Actually, a few of them did, but anyway, back to my plugs. Ladies and gentlemen, this week on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, a few notes. Of course, on Breaking Kayfabe with Baldwin and Barry, they discuss movies, they discuss music, they discuss wrestling matches, and this week, Tito Santana, or as some people call him, Chico Santana, will be on the show. BaldrinPod.com are available wherever you find your favorite shows. On Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam and Sean Goodwin this week, they're going to look at the Wrestling Observer Newsletter's top 100 wrestlers of 1984. A very interesting discussion at McAdamPod.com, or once again, wherever you find your favorite podcast. I have a little bit of an announcement right now. Coming soon to the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight, Then and Now. We're going to look at classic moments from John Arezzi's radio show in the 70s, in the 80s, and in the 90s. Classic interviews, classic moments, breaking wrestling news at the time, and we're going to discuss it in a current context, bring on old guests to discuss their old appearances. It's really going to be something.
And he's like Frasier. He saved a cassette tape of every show he ever did, right?
He saved everything. His photos, his films, his videos, his cassettes. He has everything.
A man after my own heart.
Stay tuned for more information about that. We'll have more information about when it's going to debut at facebook.com/superpodcast or on Twitter at Superpodcast. So follow those pages to get more information, but we're very, very excited about this show. This is really going to be something. And of course, the 605 Superpodcast, the mothership!
I just didn't have the energy.
This week on the show, we mentioned it last week. We have a packed show. Les Thatcher, hey, Jim Valley in the co-host chair for the very first time, Mike O'Gorman, the top 10, and much more. And by the time this show comes out later in the day, Opening Day Star Wars, our annual special looking at baseball and wrestling. And listen to this lineup, Jim, our starting lineup. Lou Kippelman, Kurt Brown, Scott Cornish, Kevin Sullivan, John Arezzi, George Shire, David Bixenspan, Dan Farron, Mike Sempervive, John McAdam, and Bob Barnett. This is a fun and interesting
Good Lord. Show. Is there anybody minding the store?
Well, I thought you were minding the store. That's why we didn't put you on the air. But you can hear that.
I'm robbing you blind.
You can hear that and so much more at 605pod.com, or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast. And I also want to mention that if you enjoy the experience in a drive-thru, please subscribe to our YouTube page, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, tinyurl.com/official Corny YouTube, or just go to YouTube and look for Jim Cornette. It'll pop right up. Every single episode goes up with exclusive, awesome Travis Heckel artwork. So check that out right now.
Well, there you go. All right. We are going to hear about the greatest. I'm going to say this right now. This is the best, the most well-produced wrestling documentary series I have ever seen that is about to debut on Vice TV. And we're going to talk to the guy behind it. If you work the magic and plug him in.
Well, I believe we actually have him on the line right now, Jim.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, joining us, I said he was the mastermind. He's actually the producer and one of the creators of the incredible new documentary series about pro wrestling, The Dark Side of the Ring, that's going to be airing on Vice TV beginning on Wednesday night, April 10th. He is Evan Husney. And Evan, thank you for being on the program.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
You know, we've worked closely together over the last year or so on a couple of these episodes, but you've lived this thing for so long now. You've been a wrestling fan for a long time, and one of the reasons why I was excited about this project and being a part of it and seeing the finished artwork is because you knew your wrestling to begin with when you went into this. You weren't somebody who was just looking at it from the outside, but at the same time, you were able to tell the stories that are equally as informative. If you're a wrestling fan or if you've never seen or heard of these guys before, it's still a fascinating story. How'd the whole idea for the project come about?
Well, like you said, I've been a wrestling fan my whole life since, 5 years old when I saw my first match, and so it's been a lifelong obsession for sure. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I started working for Vice as a producer, producing, web documentaries and working with their feature film department. And I just always was itching to try and figure out a way to do like a large scale wrestling documentary of some kind. And, and it was tricky because like all the, you know, like whether there was access we could get or not, or finding the right story, or sometimes like it would just be like too ambitious and they like my department didn't have the money, you know, to put into it. And so I was like, all right. And so it was about 3 years ago, or it's like, you know, a few years later, the Vice launched their TV network. And they were saying, you know, we have this new TV network now, and we're going to need a bunch of new ideas, you know, to populate the channel. And, you know, this is your channel, and, you know, come to us with ideas, and, you know, you could have your own show. And so I was like, drank the Kool-Aid on that a little bit. And I was like, all right, like maybe this could be a TV show, you know? And so I basically was just trying to figure out like what could be the best story that like, you know, they would get, non-wrestling fans would be excited about, like something that would cross over. And
well, yeah.
That was
and
really when
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's the thing about all the stories you picked, and we'll go over them in detail. But the stories that you picked are so fascinating. It is the dark side of the ring, and it's not, you know, sleazy tabloid. It's these incredibly, maybe sometimes poignant, sometimes tragic, all true stories that took place in professional wrestling, but could be fascinating to people who've never heard of these people. The way you tell the story, it's really interesting to anybody, whether they know wrestling or not. That was the art of it to me.
Well, thank you. Like, you know, going into it, like trying to identify what those stories would be, it's like, you know, yeah, like you said, most of the stories are, you know, controversial in nature, explore some sort of tragic story, or even are just straight up like true crime stories, you know, that are in this world. But the thing I think that's most fascinating to people who don't really know anything about wrestling is just like, and I know everyone who listens to the show does, which is the whole kayfabe era of wrestling, where, so when you take these stories that are like, you know, a murder story or something that's just completely insane, and you throw it into a kayfabe like locker room situation where you don't know what's real and what's fake, and, you know, art imitates life, and there is this just weird dichotomy of that. So there's a lot to unpack for people who just don't know anything about that might think wrestling is just, you know, lowbrow entertainment or whatever.
One of the things that fits the bill perfectly, you've had one of these episodes screened publicly, which was the episode on the murder of Bruiser Brody. And that was screened at last year's at the All In festivities up in Chicago and got rave reviews.
Right.
But that's actually not even the only murder mystery involved. Well, tell the people, because you've lived with them. I've seen some advanced screenings, but tell the people the subjects of the episodes that you've done so far.
Well, yeah, I think the Bruiser Brody one is the one to kind of talk about first, because that's the episode that really started it all for us. And that was the story that I had identified, you know, or the one that screamed out at me first. It was like, oh my God, you know, like, and for those who don't know, it's like, you know, Bruiser Brody is this legendary, iconic, you know, insane wrestling character of the 80s. I'm sure everybody who listens to your show knows who he is, but, you know, like, and he had this, of course, tragic end while he was wrestling in Puerto Rico, where he was actually killed by another wrestler named Jose Gonzalez in a locker room right before the match started. And it's like this crazy story of like injustice, and it's all tangled also in like the world of kayfabe too, and like who he was as a person versus who his character was. And for us, like that was just such a crazy story. And I couldn't believe that story wasn't something that was like outrageous to every wrestling fan, you know, because a lot of people don't know about that story.
Well, see, like, you know, here's the thing. It was at the time in the business, because I remember Bobby Fulton is the one who gave me the phone call the day after it happened, said they've killed Brody, because he loved Brody. And in the locker rooms and in the business, everybody knew what happened. The fans, the limited number at the time that read the newsletters knew exactly what happened. And now, you know, like me, Brian, our generation, we take it for granted. But some fans, even modern day wrestling fans, and definitely not as many mainstream people, this didn't make news back then. It was wrestling. It didn't make any news. So many people have not heard the exact details of this story. And one of the things that makes it so great in the documentary, the episode, is you guys have done some of the most incredible reenactments, because everybody has seen, you know, reality shows that do reenactments, and some of them are a little stagey and a little blah, blah, blah. But these are very not only artfully done, but they help propel the story along on stuff that video never existed. I mean, if there had been a camera or a camera phone back then, we might have video of what went on in that shower, but this is the next best thing, right? And it just makes the programs. You've gone to such lengths, but that is a story, like you said, that anybody, it could fit right in with any major true crime drama series or a true crime documentary series, and it doesn't even have to be about wrestling. It was fascinating the way you guys, delved in the investigative reporting to me and the reenactments and the people that you guys were able to talk to. To me is what makes the series on all these episodes.
Well, thanks. Yeah. And and I think what I meant was also too, I think with fans, my generation more specifically, I'm sure it was, definitely in the forefront of everybody during the time when that happened.
Yeah. It's just been so long. It's been forgotten in some cases and not was never disseminated to the mainstream.
Exactly. Like if WWE had gone, to a foreign country and one wrestler killed another, I mean, it would be front page news everywhere, right? So it was just it was crazy. It was crazy to me that was something that actually happened. And so that was the story we took to Vice first, and they let us, pilot the show with that story, in which we did. And then the reenactment sort of came about, because obviously, you're telling these stories that take place outside the ring for the most part. So you have to kind of figure out a way, how can you articulate to people, show people illustrate where these people were in that space, how it went down, and those from the people who witnessed it, And so we had this idea of we wanted to do reenactments, but normally reenactments are so cheesy, like on Forensic Files or whatever, those types of shows, they're traditionally speaking. And so it was we wanted to kind of do something trippier, which was we wanted to make them look like almost a faded memory, like they were sort of something that happened in the past. And so we production designed it very minimally. Everything is super noir lighting. Everyone's in soft focus and harsh shadows. And then we just wanted it to seem very impressionistic, almost dreamlike, so the audience.
That's perfect. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. The audience can picture kind of how it's more about how the subject is recalling what's happening versus them showing you this highly produced, on location people in wigs type thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it has a bizarre effect to it, which is really cool. And Jason Eisner, who directed all the episodes of the show, it was kind of something he had come up with as a way to kind of show that, which I thought is just so brilliant. I just love the way it looks, and I think it has a cool effect for the whole show.
Well, and you guys also, and of course, you came down here a couple of times to the castle because you're taking care to not only your investigative reporting on the topic, but you're taking care to be historically correct in wrestling and to have the details and etc. So the vault yielded some treasures for you, and my
sure did.
My savant-like memory of things in history. But tell us some of the other topics on some of the other episodes. Is Brody the debut, which is April 10th on Wednesday night on Vice? Is Brody the debut episode?
It's not, even though it's the first one that we shot. But they're actually going to be leading with. This is a good segue into another episode. They're going to be doing, it's going to premiere with the episode that we did about Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth.
Oh, fantastic!
Which I don't even know. I don't think you've seen that one.
You know what? I thought I'd seen all but Moolah, but apparently I haven't seen that one either.
Yeah. Yeah. So for that one, when we were looking at other stories, and of course there's no shortage of stories that, you could do for this series. And it was more about whittling them down, seeing the access we could get, what stories would be the best for a non-fan audience to get really swept up in, and which ones also check the boxes for it has an interesting art imitating life or kayfabe kind of angle to it, just to heighten it even more. And obviously, for my money, Randy Savage has always been my favorite wrestler ever. And I've always wanted to just see like a prestige sort of piece about him, you know? And so we decided, rather than doing just like a typical, like, you know, biographical, like this is where he grew up and this is, you know, he was a baseball player beforehand and blah, blah, blah. You know, we decided to just focus on their relationship, on Randy and Miss Elizabeth's relationship, because there's so many fascinating parallels between, you know, who they were on screen and off screen, and how, like, you know, those lines blurred, you know, quite heavily as their career went on. And then you find it's this kind of like really engrossing, almost like, you know, Shakespearean love story about these two, you know, and so that's kind of the direction we wanted to take it. And also, like, Miss Elizabeth has always been kind of an elusive figure to a lot of fans. I feel like a lot of people don't really know much about her as who she really was, you know, and so we wanted to kind of, you know, and it was hard. It wasn't easy, you know, in terms of getting people who knew her best from more her side and her friends to talk about her. And so that's
one thing that you guys have done. You have gotten guests. Well, I'd say guests. You've interviewed people. You've gotten their stories on a lot of these programs that have never been in any other wrestling documentary. Family members, people involved in the periphery that weren't in the business, that have never been heard from before.
Yes, exactly. And that wasn't easy. But in terms of just getting, you know, people to, you know, because a lot of wrestling documentaries, or, you know, wrestling is, like you were saying earlier, has been like, you know, there's a lot of tabloid wrestling stories, and like the media has portrayed wrestling in a certain way, you know, for many, many years. And so for us, it's like, no, we're not just TV executives. No, we're obsessed fans too, but we're not just fans. You know what I mean? Like, trying to explain and getting them to trust that, like, you know, we are actually have everyone's best interest in mind, and we're just trying to, like, you know, tell a good story, a true story, and a compelling one too. So it worked out, you know.
You know, one of the I don't even know if I'm jumping ahead, but one of the to me the I don't know how I would describe, what adjective I would give to describe the Von Erich episode, but I mean, touching, heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching. Yeah, especially one of the most in-depth and personal interviews with Kevin Von Erich that I've ever seen. Some of the visuals that you got with the family photos, etc., but just the access there and spending time with him in Hawaii at the compound. I think you had been there before you came here. You were Hawaii to Louisville, but just what an atmosphere he lives in there is completely opposite. So peaceful and content from the chaos that he lived in Dallas in the 80s when everybody was just, you know, going insane.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Von Erich story has been chronicled, you know, many times before. But for us, like, you know, with that being said, it's just like, it's the most, like, almost Twilight Zone like episode, you know, or story of just like this family that had to endure like so much unrelenting tragedy. And obviously, like, the pressures of stardom has, you know, a factor in the story, and it's just unbelievable. Like, for people who don't know anything about wrestling to look at like any family in show business and to see like that, you know, being a symptom of that or that happening, like it's completely wild. And so we knew we wanted to do it from like the beginning if we could get Kevin on board, and he was totally open and invited us out and, you know, to Hawaii, and he was just so cool. He was like the coolest. And, you know, it wasn't an easy, you know, like at first, and, you know, because, you know, we spent several days with him, you know, to get him comfortable and to ease into telling the story. And I think, you know, he even remarked on Twitter that I don't think that he's even gone that in depth before on what has all happened. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't easy for him, you know, for sure, but it, you know, it definitely shows. And so I think, like, from, you know, that's probably my favorite episode out of the bunch, just because of the result of just how powerful it is.
Well, you know, that's one thing that you guys were able to do is these are wrestling personalities that have, in some cases, have been asked these questions before, but they're not giving wrestling answers. They're not giving wrestling promos. Kevin Von Erich is more real in this program than he's ever been. You talk to, you know, as a matter of fact, Dutch Mantell, what a tremendous job that he did. Not only, obviously, he was a witness and integral to the Brody story, but he's also done some voiceover where he may be the wrestling version of Morgan Freeman by the time this thing is over with.
Yeah, because he narrated Dutch narrated 5 of the 6 episodes of the show. And yeah, the minute that we met him, we were just like, okay, this guy needs to be the voice of the show. You know?
And he's doing a different. He's Dutch, but the whole thing is, that's where I was going with that. Is you've talked to wrestling people and made them give real life interviews and real life performances, and it's a different way than anybody's done these stories before. And then there's Gino Hernandez, which, you know, that's the one above all the others that I learned things that I didn't know. And I had just been there in Dallas working with the guy, you know, just months before he died.
Yeah, that story to me, you know, was one that was probably the most exciting to work on, I would say, because for the most part, most of the stories of the show like have been chronicled, you know, in a wrestling, you know, article, documentary, or whatever at some point, you know. But this one really felt new and felt like purely journalistic. Like there's like, you know, and it was also like we kind of went into it not knowing where this was going at all. And you know, for those of you who don't know, like, you know, Gino Hernandez is like, you know, he was like, you know, how would you describe him? Like he's like this Playboy wrestler. You know, and he was, ascending like his career.
Gino was an Hispanic Ric Flair in Dallas in the height of the 80s and involved in everything that you would think that a superstar celebrity that lived in the best house and the best condo in the ritziest section of town and drove the sports car and everything. He was involved in all those things. Gino was Gino. He wasn't a gimmick.
Well, exactly. And that was kind of the big theme of that show was like, you know, what it means to live your gimmick, right? Like, you know, and so anyway, so we looked at all these interviews with like other people online, like other wrestlers. And, you know, there's tons of people in the business who were convinced that this guy was murdered because he died under mysterious circumstances. He was basically found dead in his apartment. You know, there was no drugs found on the scene, yet it was an overdose. And there was a loaded pistol found like inches away from his hand, and the deadbolt on his front door was unlocked. And it was just like all these just curious details. And then a lot of people also had speculated that, you know, he was running with this really tough crowd, and that people had described as being like mafioso or like drug lords or whatever.
And he had been exhibiting paranoia to some people in the business who were quoted and talked to in the thing. And I guess there's no secret. I mentioned Dallas in the 80s. Gino at all times, we found out, had a sugar bowl, or was it a cereal bowl, of cocaine in his kitchen cabinet for just such an occasion.
Yeah, exactly. And so so we didn't really know where this was going, and a lot of people who were working on the show with us were like, well, you know, you guys don't have an ending for this story. Like, you know, where's it going to go? Because we didn't know. And everything like really changed, was a total game changer for us when we finally got through to his family. And then we realized that his mother is still living. And we had a phone, we managed to get her on the phone. And I don't want to spoil the show.
I was about to say, let me say this. Every one of these episodes has some type of reveal where that there is information that has never been come to light before, and has not been, even in the Observer, folks, even in the Wrestling Observer, there's, in every show there's like something, and we'll talk about another one of those in a second. But this, you did put the capper on this story, and also shed some light on a lot of rumors about Gino's parentage.
Yes. And, well, just like the one thing I was going to say, and I'll just leave it at this as like a tantalizing tidbit before the episode airs, is essentially we dove in on this episode, you know, when she told us on the phone that, and she had never spoken to anybody about this before. And she said to us that she has looked her son's killer in the eyes before. And then I got like chills, you know, and I was like, oh my God. And he was just like, I know who he is, where he is. And I was like, oh my God, drop everything. We're doing this. And that's what we walked into. Yeah. So.
And And then there's nobody died in this one, but there is an episode on the Montreal screw job. And I was consulted for that one along with a few other people. And I will say that there's something that's going to be revealed in that one. And I think that's that one, we'll just tell people now. I think that one airs as the follow-up on the 17th. The Montreal screw job episode on April 17th. But there's things that were revealed in there as well. And also it was a sort of a palate cleanser because there's almost a death or a tragedy in every single other one of these episodes. So this one was just purely business. And you got a chance to play with a few things.
Well, I think for a lot of fans, they might be like, well, that story's been told. And even though that there is some new reveals in that episode, as you're saying, but the thing about it is that like, I think when I first told you about it, you were like, well, that story is like the Leonard Skinner Freebird, you got to have that in your playlist, or whatever. And it's so true.
Yeah, that's it's become an old standard, like, Moon Glow or something.
Exactly. But that being said, I think for a non-fan, like people who don't know anything about that story, I think like as far as like the inner workings of the business, as a huge, title shift in the business, it's like one of the most important stories and it also serves a good purpose in our show because it really educates non-wrestling fans on just how the inner workings of everything functions. I'm sure a lot of people would never consider, how much thought is put into who's the champion and why it's important, what it means, and, what doing business means. And then for us, it was like cool because then with the reenactments, we could portray it as like this total like backstage, Ocean's 11, plot, to like.
Yeah. And that's the way it came off, right? Yeah. I'm glad I wasn't George Clooney, but.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like even though for you.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. Well,
I was just going to say, even for you, you lived it. So maybe it was a little bit more, every day or something. But I think, for us on the outside, it was like, wow, there's so much cool backstage stuff shifting, around. And it just really shows, I think, like the importance of all of it and what it means to everybody involved. Like everyone involved in the story. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say is that it shows how important for 100 years, and it gives historical significance to the idea of the world champion in wrestling and how much it meant and who the standard bearer was, and in a very interesting way, I think. But that's probably the last time that the World Wrestling Championship for any company was that important, because now we've entered the full sports entertainment era where the belts change and they're given to this guy or that guy, and it's still it's a shell of its former self as far as for 100 years, who's the top guy or who are the top 2 or 3 guys in the wrestling business.
Absolutely.
There's not that much importance placed on that. So now the fans, even today, who hear, and Meltzer's written about it where he says, as silly as it sounds today in 2019, but in 1997, they took who the world wrestling champion was seriously. Well, you can go back to, and we did go back and mention things that the world championship actually in the 1930s in wrestling was worth even more than it was in the 1990s. I think that gives a non-fan some type of perspective, as you said, into, God, this wasn't just a, hey, kids, let's put on a show type of business where they just went out there and fought. This was deadly serious at the time to the people involved in it.
Exactly. And to your point too, there's also 45 belts now. So
it's hard to tell.
It's just, exactly. And that was kind of the idea going into doing it, was like, anyone who doesn't know anything about this, like, this is kind of the ground floor entry into the world that you're going to, like by the time you see the Montreal Screwjob episode and then you get through the Von Erichs and Brody, like, the audience at that point is probably going to have a deep understanding of what the backstage stakes are, for everything, which I think is important.
You've got 6 episodes in the can, right? This initial run is 6.
Yes. Yep.
But then obviously what what we're trying to do is encourage all the wrestling fans to watch this thing so that they will want to make more of them, because that's the funny thing about these television networks. If a lot of people watch a program, they want to make more of them. And these things are so well done, and you've got such a grip on how to tell these stories, and just the in a way it's never been done before. I was knocked out because I have low to medium expectations on not only wrestling documentaries, not only from a production standpoint, but also from a historical or biographical standpoint, because I feel like, okay, I know more than they're going to tell me anyway, and usually that's correct. And secondly, even except if it's, WWE studios and they take a lot of time and care of the production, sometimes it leaves you wanting more. But in this case, you guys have hit the thing out of the park on both ends. You taught me something, and I really like watching them visually. So I know I don't usually rave, and it's not just because I'm in a couple of them, folks. I don't usually rave about these. I'm not in two of the ones that I like the best. But I don't usually rave like this, but that way it's true. Anyway, I've said it at Vice TV, right? And it's going to be, what time is it Eastern time on a Wednesday night starting April 10th?
It is going to be at 9. Wednesdays at 9, starting on the 10th, and then, every week, every Wednesday from there on.
And hopefully, the initial run of 6, and then hopefully it's going to be a hit series so that we can, because I still say that the controversy between me and Jim Herd would make a good episode. So we got to get to like the 15th season for that. And finally they'll get, let's do Cornette's Herd story now. Cause we've done everything else, but Evan, I appreciate it, man. I think, is there a place, is there any kind of Twitter thing or place where the fans can go and praise this show so that Vice will want to make more?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can follow us on Instagram at Dark Side of the Ring, and Twitter is Dark Side of Ring, of course. And you can find us on Facebook as well, but we're going to be, in the coming days here, we have a trailer coming out in a few days and a bunch of other stuff that I'm sure that, your listeners are going to start seeing a bunch of information on. But yeah, get us on Instagram, Twitter, and let us know what you think. I hope you guys like it. We spent 3 years on it, so it should be
3 years of your life, from Hawaii to Toronto to Florida to wherever. And by the way, remember to tag me, as the kids say, on all these tweets, because I'm a good retweeter. A number of people over the weekend will tell you I'm a wonderful retweeter. But I want to get the word out there on this. All right. Anyway.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much. And hope everyone enjoys the show.
Evan, thank you, man. And I think, Brian, I believe this is a good time to close it up. Thank you for chirping in on that interview, by the way, Brian. We appreciate that. Brian usually goes to sleep about this time. Anyway, he needs one of those little blue pills to keep him up late at night. Anyway. All right. Amazing. On that one, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Another edition in the archives for the Jim Cornette Experience. Be sure to watch Dark Side of the Ring on Vice. Be sure to come see me in New York for Major League Wrestling. Be sure and do all the other things that we asked you nicely to do over the program's course today. And until then, next week, and we told you we won't be back next week. It's the WrestleMania review episode on Monday or thereabouts, the 8th of April. We'll be back next week on the drive-thru. Oh, fuck it. Thank you. Fuck you. Bye-bye, everybody.